This runway is nearly 4 kilometers long. It was built to handle the world's largest aircraft, Boeing 747s, Airbus A380s, planes that carry 500 people at a time. The terminal is pristine, the infrastructure is world-class, and across its entire commercial lifespan, this airport served fewer passengers than a mid-sized railway station handles on a Tuesday afternoon. Over €1 billion spent, not on a war, not on a disaster, on an airport that geography, economics, ecology, and basic common sense all screamed, from the very beginning, should never have been built. This is Ciudad Real Central Airport, the most comprehensively failed megaproject in modern Spanish history. And this is how it happened. To understand how €1 billion disappeared into a field in central Spain, you first have to understand the era that made it possible. Spain in the early 2000s was electric. The economy was growing at nearly 4% a year. EU structural funds were pouring into the country. Interest rates were at historic lows, and every regional government, every mayor, every minister was competing to build something bigger, bolder, and more transformational than the guy in the next province. Ciudad Real sits about 200 kilometers south of Madrid. Population, roughly 70,000 people. A pleasant, quiet provincial city, best known for being in the heart of Don Quixote country. Not exactly a global aviation crossroads, but the regional government had what they believed was a genuinely visionary idea. A brand new, privately funded international airport, built from scratch on open land. No legacy infrastructure to work around. No constraints inherited from the 1950s. The pitch was compelling on paper. Madrid-Barajas, one of Europe's most congested airports, was bursting at the seams. Here was a modern alternative, just 2 hours away. A cargo hub that would drag Castilla-La Mancha into the 21st century economy. A magnet for low-cost airlines, freight operators, and charter routes. They broke ground in 2003, and they gave it a name that, in hindsight, tells you everything you need to know about how disconnected this project was from reality. The airport was not originally called Ciudad Real Central Airport. It was going to be named Don Quixote Airport. Let that land for a moment. Don Quixote, the most famous fictional character in the history of Spanish literature. A man so completely consumed by his own delusions of grandeur that he charged at windmills, convinced they were giants. A man who mistook his fantasies for reality with such absolute certainty that no amount of evidence could shake him. The airport that would later become one of the greatest monuments to political delusion in modern European history was almost literally named after a madman chasing windmills. And here's the kicker. The La Mancha Plateau, where the airport was built, is covered in wind farms. There are actual windmills on the horizon. If the name had stuck, you would have been able to stand on the empty tarmac of Don Quixote Airport, look out at the windmills in the distance, and watch the poetry write itself in real time. The name was eventually changed to the more sober Ciudad Real Central Airport before opening. Perhaps someone, somewhere, had a moment of self-awareness, or perhaps they simply didn't want the metaphor on the letterhead. Either way, the name changed. The delusion didn't. Before this was an airport site, it was something else entirely. The land around Ciudad Real is part of one of the most important bird habitats in continental Europe, home to the great bustard, the world's heaviest flying bird, along with rare steppe eagles, Montagu's harriers, and dozens of other protected species. The site chosen for the airport sat directly adjacent to a ZEPA zone, a Zona de Especial Protección para las Aves, a special protection area for birds, one of the most legally protected designations in European environmental law. You cannot build in a ZEPA zone. You cannot significantly impact a ZEPA zone. The EU is extremely clear on this. The regional government's solution? Move the birds. I want you to really absorb that sentence. Their plan for the legally protected, ecologically irreplaceable steppe bird habitat sitting next to their airport was to relocate the birds, as if great bustards were filing cabinets that could simply be shifted 2 offices down the hall. Millions of euros were spent on environmental mitigation programs. Bird deterrent systems were installed. Consultants were hired. Reports were filed. Boxes were ticked. And the EU, under pressure from environmental groups, launched investigations that dragged on for years, adding legal complexity and cost to a project that was already hemorrhaging money before a single plane had landed. The birds, for their part, remained entirely unimpressed by the billion-euro project next door. They didn't relocate, they stayed. And ultimately, the airport, not the birds, is the thing that disappeared. Here's the thing about airports. You can't just build one and expect the passengers to materialize. Airlines don't go where the infrastructure is beautiful. They go where the people already need to travel. And the people around Ciudad Real already had a faster, cheaper, more convenient way to get where they needed to go. Spain's AVA high-speed rail network had connected Ciudad Real to Madrid Atocha station since 1992. 50 minutes, city center to city center. Comfortable, frequent, and significantly cheaper than flying. Why would would any rational person take a taxi 28 kilometers to an airport on the edge of nowhere, check in 2 hours early, pay airport prices for a coffee, fly 200 kilometers to Madrid, take another transfer to the city center when they could walk to the train station, press play on a podcast, and be in central Madrid before the flight even boards? The airport was also built 28 kilometers outside the city. No rail link to the terminal, no metro, no direct motorway. You needed a car to reach it. And if you had a car, you were almost certainly just going to drive to Madrid. The entire business case was built on a foundation of sand. To build this airport, you need money, enormous sums of it. And in Ciudad Real, that money had a name. Caja Castilla-La Mancha, Spain's cajas, regional savings banks, were the financial backbone of provincial Spain, not shareholder-driven investment banks, not cold-blooded Wall Street operations. These were community institutions, banks that had been serving farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers for over a century. Caja Castilla-La Mancha was the heart of the region's financial ecosystem, and it was also, fatally, one of the primary lenders to the airport project. As the airport construction stretched on, as costs overran, as environmental complications mounted, as the 2008 financial crisis began cracking the foundations of the entire Spanish economy, the bank's exposure to the airport and to the broader real estate collapse became terminal. In March 2009, the Bank of Spain intervened. Caja Castilla-La Mancha was placed under emergency administration. It became the first Spanish bank to be bailed out in the entire financial crisis. Not a reckless investment bank, not a hedge fund gambling on derivatives, a community savings bank that had trusted a regional government's vision of windmills that turned out to be giants. The bailout cost Spanish taxpayers approximately 1.3 billion euros. The bank was eventually absorbed into another institution, its identity dissolved, its century-long history reduced to a footnote in the catastrophe ledger of the Spanish boom years. The airport didn't just waste public money, it broke a bank. It erased a financial institution that thousands of ordinary people had trusted with their savings, and yet, despite all of that, the project still limped forward. Because in the political culture of Castilla-La Mancha, admitting failure was simply not an option. The airport opened in 2008. It declared bankruptcy in 2012, 4 years. In that time, a handful of airlines, Ryanair most notably, had attempted routes. Charter operators ran occasional holiday flights. There was brief, cautious optimism. In its single best year, the airport handled approximately 140,000 passengers. Heathrow processes that number every 6 hours. Madrid-Barajas does it in a weekend. Even that modest figure wasn't enough. Not close. The revenues generated couldn't cover the operating costs of maintaining a facility built for 10 times the traffic. In 2012, commercial flights ceased. The airport was mothballed. Staff were dismissed. The doors were locked, and the silence that had always seemed like a temporary condition became permanent. By 2015, the creditors had run out of patience. With debts mounting and no viable operator in sight, a Spanish court ordered the airport to be sold through a formal bankruptcy auction. A €1 billion facility, runways, terminal, fire stations, control tower, cargo infrastructure, the whole complex was going under the hammer. The opening bid was set at just €10 million, 1% of construction cost, an already humiliating number. But what happened next wasn't just financially shocking, it was an insult. A Chinese investment group called Zanin International submitted the first serious bid, €10,000, not 10 million, not 1 million, not even 100,000, 10,000 euros, the price of a second-hand family saloon car, for a €1 billion international airport. The Spanish court predictably rejected it, but the damage was done. That bid didn't just lowball an asset. It sent a message heard across every financial institution, every regional government, every infrastructure ministry in Europe. This airport is worth less than a used car. Zanin International later returned with a revised offer and ultimately took control of the asset for a reported figure in the region of €10 million, the floor price the court had set. 1% of construction cost. They announced plans to relaunch the airport as an international logistics hub. Press releases were issued. Promises were made. Commercial flights never resumed. The cargo hub never materialized. The press releases gathered digital dust, and the airport settled back into its permanent state, waiting. Today, if you make the drive out to Ciudad Real Central Airport, what you encounter is genuinely, profoundly unsettling. Not because it's destroyed, not because it's crumbling or rusted or reclaimed by nature, but because it isn't. The terminal looks like it's waiting for you, not abandoned, paused. The check-in desks are still numbered. The departure gates are still signed. The airport's branding is still on every wall. It feels less like a ruin and more like a film set, where the director called lunch and simply never came back. Sunlight floods through the departure lounge windows and falls on row after row of empty seats. all oriented toward a runway that hasn't seen a commercial aircraft in over a decade. The only sound is the wind, the only movement is dust, and that runway, that flawless 4-kilometer stretch of engineered perfection, is genuinely well maintained. Because as it turns out, a pristine private airport in the middle of nowhere, with no passengers and no questions asked, has one very specific kind of appeal. Ciudad Real Airport has found a second life, not as an airport, never again as an airport, but as something its designers never imagined, a film and TV production location. The runway has hosted episodes of Top Gear. Luxury and supercar brands have filmed commercials here. Lamborghini, McLaren, Porsche. 4 kilometers of private, closed tarmac. No air traffic control to worry about. No public access, no speed limits. For automotive producers, it's a dream location. The terminal building, that vast, cinematic glass facade, has appeared as everything from a thriller's classified facility to a dystopian government complex. Because here's the dark irony of Ciudad Real Airport. The building is magnificent. The architecture is striking. The spaces are dramatic. The scale is cinematic. It was just built in entirely the wrong place, for entirely the wrong reasons, with absolutely no one to actually use it. So now it earns its keep renting itself out to camera crews who need a beautiful, empty, post-apocalyptic world as their backdrop. A €1 billion project, reduced to a film location. The Don Quixote Airport, finally playing a role it was built for. Ciudad Real Airport is not a story of engineering failure. The runways are perfect, the terminal is sound, the infrastructure works exactly as designed. This is a story of something far more human and far more dangerous, the complete and deliberate suspension of critical thinking in the service of political ambition. Every warning sign was there: the rail competition, the tiny catchment population, the EU environmental designations, the absence of committed airline partners. Every single one was visible, every single one was ignored, because once a megaproject becomes a political symbol, the project stops being about the outcome. It becomes about the ribbon cutting. €1 billion of public money, a collapsed regional bank, a destroyed bird habitat, a humiliating €10,000 auction bid, and a terminal that now earns more from car commercials than it ever earned from passengers. This was never just a failed airport. It was a monument to the moment a society decided to chase windmills and called it infrastructure. Ciudad Real isn't an anomaly. It isn't a freak accident or a 1 in a million miscalculation. It is a category, and that category has a name: built to fail. Projects that were destined for disaster from the moment the first blueprint was drawn. Megastructures that burned billions and left nothing but concrete, silence, and a very expensive lesson nobody wanted to learn. If this story made you feel something, whether that's outrage, disbelief, or the deeply satisfying horror of watching ambition collide at full speed with reality, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm this story deserves to be seen. Subscribe to Built to Fail, because we are just getting started and the failures get so much bigger from here. And right now, on your screen, is a project that makes Ciudad Real look like a minor accounting error, an entire city built for 2 million residents, with streets, skyscrapers, shopping malls, and a metro system. Every single element, complete. Every single apartment, empty. No one was ever invited to live there. Click it. The next failure is waiting.